Everyone here. I want to welcome everyone here. My name is Ashok Mathur. I am the Dean of Graduate Studies and Interim Vice President of Research here at OCAD University, which is situated on the lands of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, as well as the Huron-Wendat and the Mississaugas of the Credit. It's also, because this is in Toronto, we're the home of a very, very large urban Indigenous population, as well as a Métis population. That's not part of our official land acknowledgement. I think it's very important to reference, particularly in these times. And I look at this room and I know many of you are like Krista in Coast Salish territory and Musqueam territory. So it's important for us, I think, to recognize and acknowledge that, particularly, and I have to say, over the last week, it's been a very hard week for many people. As I mentioned yesterday, I think the day before yesterday, I spent 7 years in Kamloops. I worked at the university there, and I taught a course on reconciliation, and the students would tell me they had never heard of residential schools, even though you could see it from the hilltop of the university looking down. So it's personally resonating for me, and of course for so many of the people in my community and people I met at that time. So I do, my heart's going out to this, and I think it's very, very important for us to recognize what's going on. Incidentally, we will be doing something on June 17th as a university, a vigil that Peter Moran's organizing, along with Nadia McLaren, and so we're looking forward to that. We did something together last week. We'll do something more, and I appreciate people taking time and the thoughts behind that. With that said, I am going to now do a very informal introduction of Archer Pechawis. I'm not going to go into the details of him and his life. I have known Archer for a very long period of time, and known him as one of the most intriguing and consummate performance artists working in the country today and of yesterday, because he's been doing this for a long time. So every time we meet, I learn something new from Archer, and I also am deeply appreciative of the depth of knowledge he has of Indigenous artistic practice that I'm sure you hear some of this today that's occurred in this country. And it's been a very interesting, intriguing, and vexed history. And Archer is the person who knows all this stuff, right? And it's really, really beautiful. So I sit at his feet to listen and to learn, as I'm sure many of you will. And I'm going to say nothing further but to welcome Archer to the screen, and take it away, Archer.
Aho. Kinaneskolten Ashok. Archer Pechawis Nasikasan. Mistawasis Nehiawak, Kiochiwak, Nawagamaganak. Megwach Toronto Nuigin. Nehio Nepeonia. My name is Archer Pechawis. My people are from Mistawasis Nehiawak, which is a Plains Cree community in Saskatchewan. I live in Toronto with my wife Giselle and our 2 children, Kiwitin and Miote. I have been a working artist for a really long time, and it's the best life you can possibly have. I want to again do a shout out to Ashok and all the organizers of Contingencies of Care, to say thank you for inviting me to be part of this this beautiful event, and honoring me with this an opportunity to do this artist talk. Protocol dictates that when we do cultural work, we begin with a song. So I will sing a song, and at the end of our session, I will sing another song to sing the spirits back out. I think I'll sing the Eagle song. This is an Anishinaabe. The song is in Anishinaabe Moan. We are inviting the spirit of the eagle to join us, and we are honoring the spirit of the eagle at the same time. Here's the birds outside my window. This isn't part of the song. It's really beautiful. I don't know if you can hear it. Well, hey, away, way on. Yeah, hey, oh, hey, way, way on. Well, hey, away, way on. Yeah, hey, oh, hey, way, way on. Way, oh, hey, way, way on. Way, oh, hey, way, way on. Yeah, hey, oh, hey, way, way on. Yeah, shaking on. couldn't remember how many times I'd gone through the song. You're supposed to do it 4 times. I couldn't remember how many times I'd been through, but it's okay. We got through it. We are well. I did not. I recall this song from, I'm just going to read Kevin's comment. I recall the song from Graduate Studies Orientation. Thank you, Archer, for music. You're well. Thank you, Kevin. You're so very welcome. Yeah, I do. I sing the Eagle song a lot. It's one of my favorites. I will make that confession right now. I did not set out to be an artist as a young person. It was not on my radar. Art was not on my radar. Artists were not on my radar. And the world of art making and its occult practices were not part of my experience at all. And it was merely, I want to say bad luck. It was just bad luck. I fell in with a bad crowd. I met a bunch of clowns when I was 18 years old, living in Vancouver. And I was absolutely fascinated. I was fascinated by the clowns, and I really wanted to know more about them. And I began to, I put them under surveillance. I put them under surveillance and watched them. I watched them very carefully, and I can't remember how to do present on these things. Just a minute. Oh yes, right. There we go. Archer Pechawis. I was fascinated by the clowns, and I put them under surveillance. And of course, what came to pass is that I started being a clown. I quit the job. I was installing car stereos at a car shop in North Vancouver, and I called my boss one Monday morning and told him that I quit, and he asked me why, and I said, because I'm going to be a clown. And he used to hang out with clowns when he was young, so he wished me the best. And I started studying the ways of the clown. I became a street juggler, fire breather, and did that for a number of years in my early 20s. Here I am doing some storytelling was a big part of my practice at that time. Making people laugh and telling stories is what I did. And unless you're an exceptionally gifted juggler, which I never was and never will be, people don't pay you to display your skills. They pay you to entertain them. That's what people want. People want to be entertained. So I've come a very long way from being a street juggler, the most accessible of performance styles, to being a performance artist, the most inaccessible of performance styles. And this is the story of how that journey took place. Here I am. I used to open for punk rock bands back in the day. This is me opening for the Nils at Les Foufounes Electriques, a nightclub, which may or may not still be there in Montreal, doing my 3-ball juggling routine. After attending the Del Arte School of Physical Theater, which is essentially a clown school in Northern California, I came back to Canada and started doing here outdoor theater, spectacle theater. This was myself and Norman Armour performing in Mother Courage and Her Children, the Bertolt Brecht play. And this is, again, the same company, Ruby Slippers and Public Dreams, doing a spectacle performance of Threepenny Opera, where I got to be the Moritat. So I got to sing Mac the Knife, which was a highlight for me, a highlight in my career. I also did a lot of devised theater. This is doing The River Home with Margot Kane's company, Full Circle, in Vancouver. And not long after that, I became very interested in doing my own performance work. I was hugely influenced by the late Ahasu Muskegon Isqueo, probably the single biggest influence on me, the artistic influence on me. Him, Laurie Anderson, and Rebecca Belmore, I would name check as my 3 biggest influences. This performance was called Choice. I took a door off a car that I owned and installed it in the gallery so I could roll the window up and down. I had a picture of myself and my family taped to the window, which you can just barely make out there. In the mid-90s, I had a vision, if you will, of doing a performance where I took a hand drum, traditional hand drum, and mounted trigger pads to it. So while singing neo-traditional songs, I could trigger audio samples of whatever I wanted. This culminated in a performance called Memory, which debuted at the Western Front in Vancouver in 1997. The audio samples I used for that performance were from the OJs, Soundgarden, Jimi Hendrix, and did I say the OJs? Because the OJs were in, oh, the Fugees. The Fugees were some of the samples that I used for that performance. There's just 3 stills of that performance. This got me interested in digital futurism. And if I was going to describe, well, I guess I am describing my practice, it's an artist talk. I would describe my practice as being informed by indigenous futurism, trauma, indigenous trauma, and our current colonial predicament are the things that inform my work the most these days. 13 years after the Memory performance in Vancouver, I was asked by Cheryl Arundel to do a remount of the performance. So I came up with Memory version 2. I know the name's very original. I'll just show you the video. I called this performance Memory to counter the feeling that we were losing our culture, that we were losing touch with what the old people had to say, that we were losing our language and our songs and our dances. There was this whole movement around addressing that sense of loss. As I was preparing this, I was very fortunate to have access to 2 amazing elders, the now deceased Sabodal, aka Harriet Nahaney, and Bill Lightbone out of Vancouver, who were incredibly generous, and you will be seeing them momentarily.
Traditional means, to me, it means a person, we are our ancestors. When you were born with your ancestor's soul. Traditional people, listen to that ancestor. You can ask your ancestor for guidance, and it just pops into your head. You're getting it from them. You may think, oh yeah, I have a great idea, but it isn't. You're receiving it from your ancestors. You keep that contact with your ancestors for guidance. You'll get it. You don't have just one ancestor with you. You have thousands and thousands of years of grandmothers, grandfathers. So all you have to do is listen to your inside, your soul. Wow.
In a lot of cases, our people over the last 100 years have adopted various kinds of technology into their processes, their cultural processes, and I think that's excellent.
That was Memory version 2. Whoops, and for some reason it's starting all over again. That's it. I just wanted to say that this image from the performance, that is my deceased grandfather, Thomas John Pechawis, and my deceased grandmother, Suzette Marie Pechawis. You can see him here holding his pipe. In this performance, the the significant changes was the drum had changed and grown and was now capable of playing video samples in addition to audio samples, which was a great leap forward for me. I am still in process around the digital drum project, and I'm going to be doing a third drum performance next spring, which is being organized by Fado, the performance art folks here in Toronto. So shout out to them. Thank you for that. I have been, the teachings I've received about the drum is that a drum is a direct connection to the spirit world. So when we are playing our drums, we are communicating with the spirits and the spirit world. So I'm very interested in what happens in the meeting space between traditional, or what is considered traditional, Plains Cree culture and digital technology or Western technology, and what happens when these spaces meet, and what goes on in that space, and what are the potentialities that exist within that space. The word liminal became really popular. Liminal became really popular a few years ago. And to me, this isn't a liminal space, but it's rather a luminous space, the luminous space of meeting. So that's where a lot of my work is centered these days. I've done a bit of published writing on artificial intelligence and indigenous culture, indigenous Plains Cree culture, to be specific. And that's one of my big interests. But again, this is the indigenous futurism angle. We are in a terrible place right now in many ways. The discovery of the 215 in Kamloops, the hideous murder of the Muslim family in London, just the atrocity of the times. But by the same but the flip side of that is that we are living in the most amazing and magical of times, and the world is full of potential and discovery and wonderment for me. So despite everything, I have never been more optimistic about our future as a species. I am gripped with a tremendous optimism and hope for the future, which is appropriate seeing I have 3 children. So I guess that's probably the best way for me to be going. I just want to express my my horror at the attack in London, and to send love and support to our Muslim brothers and sisters. That coming hot on the heels of the 215, it's been such a terrible couple of weeks. It's nearly impossible to overstate the impact of residential school upon us. My mother went to 3 residential schools, and my deceased uncle Roland Pechawis was beaten to death at the Onion Lake Residential School when he was 11 years old. So these things are intensely personal for me, as they are for all Indigenous people. But you can see change happening slowly, glacially. I want to share a word with you. There's been a lot of talk about reconciliation. This word reconciliation that Justin Trudeau is so fond of, and a word that Indigenous people find laughable in the face of non-action. So you can't have reconciliation without action. So there's someone coined a word in Cree, an alternative word, Miotamasos Tamakewen, which means the act of correcting one's own mistakes for the benefit of others. And this recognizes that despite the English word, this is not a reconciliation of 2 peoples both equally at fault. This is one side needing to make amends to the other. Miotamasos Tamakewen. I'm going to put this in the chat, actually, if anybody wants to use it for whatever. That's Please do. Yo, Tomasas Damakewan. There, it's in the chat. I do work around trauma, Indigenous trauma. I do work around Indigenous futurism. I do work around the violence perpetrated against Indigenous bodies. That's a thing I do. And in 2009, perhaps 2008, somewhere back in there, I was asked to create a performance for the Magnetic North Festival in Vancouver. And the idea, just as Harriet pointed out in the previous piece, the idea just came to me, bang. The ancestors just gave me this idea, and the performance was called Shoot the Indian. Here's a short video.
Step right up and shoot the Indian. All right, so I just stand here. Okay, and how many shots do I get? I get 10. I get to go. What's the best way of aiming this? Well, the first guy gets 10 shots. Where should I try to hit him? Wherever the fuck you want to hit him. No, poor guy. I don't think I can do it. Step right up. Okay, you ready? That's right. 4 shots. Okay, there we go. That's all good. I got 1. I got 2. I got 3.
Okay. But how?
Fighting at the moment? Okay. So you can't actually shoot this guy, eh?
Yeah, I can shoot anything.
Really? How if I just want to shoot him?
Right between the eyes. Right between the eyes.
I want to shoot him in the nuts.
Go for it.
Where we want to?
Right in the dick. Wow. Big shot.
They don't migrate from here all the way to here. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty. Whoa, that's just crazy.
They really feel the wells, eh?
Yeah. Oh my God.
And that was Shoot the Indian.
Step right up
Whoops.
and shoot the Indian.
For some reason, it keeps doing that. We'll talk about that in the artist talk. In 2012, I was asked to do a performance at the Toronto Free Gallery, and I wanted to do some work about environmental degradation and climate change and land back. And I got thinking about something I've been thinking about for many decades, which is what I call the empty plate syndrome. Malcolm X was once quoted as saying, just because all of us are sitting at the table, are all of us diners? I'm not a diner until you let me dine. And the concern, of course, is with land back is that by the time we get our land back, it may well be degraded or ruined beyond redemption. So this performance was actually an investigation into that.
I know it doesn't look like much, but our efforts to recultivate the planet are really, really paying off. I know it's not lush or beautiful the way it is there. But here at this meager garden is a miracle. Time travel is complex.
You're scaring me.
There's no reason to be scared. The whole team is here, working hard.
How many are you?
We are many. But fewer than you.
Are you red?
You're all red. I am calling you from the future, and the news is good. All that trouble we had with colonialism, it's all better now. We got all our land back. I know it looks messy, but things have mutated. And without gravel, concrete, and garbage, nothing will grow. But we're working on that. Now you're probably asking yourself, what still grows? You'll be comforted knowing that the old people were right. There is no need in any language for the word weeds. Because there are no weeds. There are only plants. And what we refer to as weeds are the only thing that will grow now. But we're working on that. And it's getting better every day. The problem with the future is that it really is a one-way trip. And I can't come back. And I really miss you all a lot. Because it's lonely here. But I'm really glad I did it. Because the future will be beautiful. It's just going to take some time.
And that was Our Beautiful Future.
I know it does.
The last piece I'm going to share with you is a performance I did in 2006 called Elegy. I was asked to do a performance for the Talking Stick Festival, an Indigenous performance festival in Vancouver. And I was thinking about what I wanted to do in the performance. I was asked to make a new performance. And what was happening in the community at that time was the upcoming trial of a man named Robert Picton, who was charged with the murder of 11 Indigenous women from the downtown east side of Vancouver. It was widely considered that Robert Picton was a patsy, that he was just taking the rap for a lot of other bad actors. It was also widely considered that there were many, many more Indigenous women. He ran a pig farm, and the bodies were disposed of there. And it was widely believed that there were many more Indigenous women missing whose bodies were there at the farm, at his pig farm. What struck me as I was doing research for the piece was how the murdered and missing women, Indigenous women, were always referred to the same way. Didn't matter what news channel it was. They were always referred to the same way. They were always referred to as Native, drug addict, prostitute. So they were dehumanized every time they were mentioned, every single time. So I decided to do a performance that would rehumanize and honor them. I also suspected that because of how small the community in Vancouver is, that there would be friends or relatives of some of these murdered and missing Indigenous women at the performance, and I wanted to do a performance that would honor them and their family member, and to hold their grief in the performance. So this is Elegy.
City Bells, born December 12, 1950. John Rebecca John, born June 23, 1971. Michelle Green, born on February 11, 1961. Teresa Louise Tripp, born August 17, 1969. I know the women whose names have not been found.
And that was Elegy. I'm going to stop the screen share now. That is my artist talk, the formal part of the artist talk. I would be happy to take questions or comments from anybody who wants to jump in. Yeah.
Got a question.
Sure, Steve.
Hi, Archer. Thank you so much for the moving talk and the commitment and wisdom and idealism, but also the insistence to talk about justice and suffering in very sort of wonderful ways, as wonderful as it's possible. I was curious about the performance of the medium of performance and liveness, and how liveness is it maybe an appropriate way to remediate or to kind of fix or pay attention to complexity? Can you talk about the role of performance in your work?
Absolutely. I am first and foremost a performer. I'm not a classic performance artist in the sense that the audience isn't there strictly as in what I consider classic performance. The audience exists to witness. It's not about entertainment. It's not about being there to to entertain. That's not the purpose of the work. And in my work, obviously, from what you've seen, it's not about entertainment either. But I'm very conscious of my role as a performer, and I embrace that. I embrace that aspect of the work. To me, what I do has a lineage that stretches back past the last couple of ice ages. We've always had the clowns or the town village crier who gets up and reinterprets the news for the people. It's like, this is what's happening, this is why it's happening, and this is how we should react to it, or these are some of the options that we have around what's happening. So to me, that's what I do is part of an ancient lineage, very much so, regardless of whatever tools I'm using to affect that performance. And I think there is a craving inside of us as humans for that reinterpretation or that interpretation of current events. Like we want somebody like those people that sit there on the news, like they're part of that lineage too. They're, you know, they're interpreting current events for us, saying this is what's happening. This is this, and these are some of the emotions you may be feeling about that. Now they don't do that on the news, obviously, but that's what I do.
Yeah. Or the news, they will sort of perhaps pre-script or rehearse how one feels, right?
Exactly.
So,
It's very packaged, whereas with performance, it's there's so much left to the discretion of the audience. And there's a, I'm going to say it, there's a sacred trust and bond that exists when you walk out on stage. There's something whole, there's not holy. I don't want to sound grandiose about this. But there's an that's it. There's an obligation. For me, I'm speaking for myself only, that I feel an obligation to bring as much realness and honesty as I can possibly bring to the performance. Like one of my rituals when I perform is, before I go on, the way I deal with my anxiety at the idea of going on stage is I pray to be an instrument and a vessel of love for people who have come, to respect and honor and to love the people who have gone out of their, taken time out of their busy lives to come and to be witness to what I'm doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the question, Stephen.
Hey, Archer, thank you so much. I have a follow-up question, if that's okay.
Of course.
Yes, thank you so much. Echoing what has been said, very powerful, and really appreciate you sharing and your openness and transparency and your emotions and what you're feeling as well. Just a follow-up note to that, this idea of like you coming on stage and feeling that obligation to your audience, like that to me seems very, and even some of the performances and pieces that you showcased seemed quite participatory, and you're actively thinking and or engaging the audience. And can you speak just a bit more about that relationship, and almost like maybe it's like a co-creation that's happening, or is that super intentional? Or just a bit more about that would be great.
Absolutely. Well, you can really see my roots in that. Being a street performer, if you don't engage, people walk away. Like, it's the most honest kind of performance you can do, because the audience has, like, when we go to a theater or we go to an art gallery to see a performance, there's a part of us that keeps us there, even if we don't like. How many times have you sat through a performance you didn't actually like? We do that because out of some weird sense of obligation or politesse, or the performer's a friend of ours or whatever, or they're our boss, or like, who knows, right? There's all kinds of polite reasons. But in street performance, that those rules do not exist, and people walk away. And so that very much remains, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for that because I think performances, it goes back to what I was talking about earlier about that lineage, about how there's this, how, for my ancestors, there was the village clown who would interpret what was going on as it was happening. There was like this constant live feedback that was going on in the performances of the clowns. And when I do work, I want people to be engaged. I want people to be, I want people to feel and to dream and to hope and to cry, and if possible, have a cathartic relationship or experience with the work. That's really important to me. I love the synergistic relationship that transpires between a performer and an audience, whether that's me going to see a concert or me doing a performance. There's something so innately human about that relationship, and that's the relationship that I always want to honor in my work. Thank you. That was a great question. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much.
Archer, I'm going to come in with a question of a slightly different focus. I'm thinking of systems, and particularly institutional systems. I'm thinking of your work and how you speak to the depth and connection around things like collaboration and co-creation with and from and around Indigenous communities. And I'm thinking of until, well, really 20 years ago, not even that, more recently, but 20 years ago, certainly, there was such an absence of, within the art and design sector, of racialized bodies in teaching positions, really, really absent. Indigenous or Black or other racialized folks, very, very almost non-existent in so many of these spaces. And that's shifted now. One of the elements that people are doing is what they call, the multiple hires, the cluster hires, which is an odd term to begin with, but the idea is to generate bodies into a space, right, in community. So my question to you is, as someone who is, I don't know, entering into academic spaces with this knowledge and this body of work, what do you think, let's say, what do you hope would be the future for the practice of Indigenous artistic practice within these institutional spaces, which I would have to say are so colonial in their presence that even when we talk about decolonizing principles and digitization and all that, it seems like it's on a layer on top, like it's not really seeping in, not really creating these spaces. That's my take on it. But I'd love to hear what you're thinking of. What will the Art Design Academy look like in 5 years or 10 years time when you have folks like yourself, people who have been working with you, like Peter Moran and other are in the room and changing those institutions. What do you see as the future for Indigenous art in professional training academies?
The first thing we have to do is burn the buildings down. That's the first thing. You can't decolonize. You can't decolonize European architecture. It is colonial in its essence. There's nothing for it. And don't get me wrong, I love black box theaters. I even love white cube galleries because I've worked in them so long. I like those spaces because I'm familiar with them. The rules are consistent, and this is the great allure of colonialism. It's horrible, and we all hate it, but there's a certain comfort to knowing the rules, even though the rules can shift and change because it's colonialism. And as soon as we start gaining any power, they'll change the rules and they'll shift the ground underneath us, and we'll find ourselves off balance. So, okay, so burn down the buildings, start there. Replace them with non-Western architecture. That might not happen. That might not happen. So, plan B, hire as many brown people as humanly possible and stuff them into these Western spaces and do our best to indigenize, brownify, blackify, Asianify the modes of thought that transpire within. I mean, that's right now that's our strongest option. And it's been really wonderful watching these institutions, these incredibly colonial institutions, watching how hard they fought when this battle to gain equity space within them, when this battle started, is just like the ferocity with which they fought back, and the denial, and then the ferocity, and this kind of cornered animal kind of bearing of the fangs. and how that's shifted over time. And now, even if it's window dressing, or if it's red washing or black washing or whatever, or yellow washing, like whatever you want to call it, that work of equity and that balancing of color is going to create profound change. Like that's going to happen, which is not to pretend that some of us aren't. There's going to be huge and often invisible temptations to succumb to those colonial forces working. I mean, there's an element of being co-opted, as we all know. It's like you can't work within power structures without being sucked into them on some level, and that's a given. And I think we need to be kind and gentle with ourselves and with one another as we negotiate that space, and as we negotiate the temptations and the sometimes invisible gravitational force of colonialism, because it's everywhere. It's in the water we drink, it's in the air that we breathe, it's in the food that we eat. I mean, very much so in the food that we eat. For us, it took 500 years to get here, and I don't think it's irrational to think it'll take 500 years to get out of here. So we're very much in an interstitial space. I mean, the 500th anniversary was 1992, so which was like kind of a jubilee year for us as Indigenous people, right? It's only 30 years later. Like we're just there are all these tropes, right? Like the seven, we have to think 7 generations ahead, but there's a reason. There's a reason that things become cliches and tropes. Like they work and they're true. Not always, obviously, but thinking about the 7th generation, that's where we need to be. So we have to be mindful, working in the master's house, always and completely. But the master's house is where the master's at, and we need to get in there. That's about all I have to say about that. Did I answer your question? David?
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. So much to talk about, but I did want to bring up your Shoot the Indian, which was such a clear demonstration of how colonial ignorance is such low-hanging fruit. It was awful to watch, but important to watch. And I congratulate you and encourage you to keep doing it, because it just needs to keep being exposed for what it is. So thank you.
Thank you, David. I couldn't agree with you more. The documentation for Shoot the Indian is very confusing, because you can't see who's yelling shoot the Indian and laughing. And those were all Indigenous friends of mine. So it was the color line or the race line in that performance was amazing. Like a lot of non-native people found the whole thing just horrifying and fled the space. And all the native people there thought it was the most hilarious thing ever, as you could hear, as evinced by the laughter in the documentation. So there was an interesting tension that went on with that. Of course, not all non-native people reacted like that. I mean, some people, as the video shows, some people embraced the work. Thank you. Thank you. I think we have time for 1 or 2 more, and then I'm contractually obligated to shut down at 5 o'clock. I don't know if that's actually true, but I just thought I'd say it.
excuse me, Archer. I had a question, if I may.
Sure.
Um, Earlier, you talked about bringing down buildings as the future of Indigenous people in professional training academies. What do you think is the role of the administration in the future of Indigenous people in professional training and academies? If there's anything that could be preserved about the government at all.
Are we talking about administration or are we talking about government?
I was thinking about government. Yes.
Well, I'm afraid that I am a hardcore anarchist to my roots when it comes to federal systems. But that said, I don't think the anarchist revolution is about to transpire, nor do I think it's going to happen in 20 years, which is really unfortunate, but that's how it is. I think Winston Churchill, a dedicated colonialist his own self, once said that democracy is the worst kind of government unless you count all the others. But I prefer to think democracy is the best thing that Western traditions come up with so far. And on paper, it's not terrible, but we all know in practice it kind of blows, frankly. Our traditional forms of governance have went underground with so many other aspects of our culture, and they are slowly reemerging. So what's more interesting to me, instead of talking about the dominant culture and what's going on with the dominant culture, which is kind of the dominant culture's problem, is to talk instead about how the reemergence of traditional forms of governments in Indian country, traditional indigenous forms of governance are reemerging, and how that impacts what's going on in Indian country currently anyways, and how that may influence the broader culture, if that answers your question, Kevin.
Thank you so much, Archer. I certainly agree that democracy is an extremely inefficient form of government, if that's the word for it. The mighty Athenian people were beaten by Spartan oligarchs, despite having superior cultural influence to this day.
Although someone pointed something out really interesting to me about the Spartans, which was, what art did they produce? What lasting artworks did they produce? Like what can we point at and say this is an example of the fine ... that the Spartans created?
I don't think I can answer that.
We got nothing. We got nothing. So that's really interesting to me, that the Spartans were like these pretty interesting culture, but where was it? They put so much work and energy into their martial prowess. It's like I don't think artists were really encouraged in Sparta. I guess that's what it boils down to. I don't know that I would have thrived in Sparta. I think we have time for one more question if anyone has one, or comments. Comments are fine. Questions don't have to be questions.
Thanks for sharing that word. I can't pronounce it properly.
Tommaso Stamakewan?
Yes, that's a really important concept. I think the one-sided acknowledgement of doing harm, and acknowledging that for the sake of those harmed, and it being not a balanced reconciliation. It's an important, I think, distinction.
It's also interesting that the word incorporates neo, the first two syllables of the word neo by itself means good. So the word incorporates the goodness of that act, the properness and the goodness for the people of participating in this act. There's a lot, well, it's a long word, so there's clearly a lot packed in there.
Is that a new word?
Yeah, someone coined it.
Okay.
Someone coined it and posted it on social media, and it was about 2 months ago, I think, maybe 3, and I saw it and I just went, oh man, that's it. I grabbed it right away, copy and paste,
Yeah.
and now I just disseminate it whenever I do anything. I'm just like, oh, by the way, here's this Cree word, boom, 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 because it's conceptually the whole reconciliation thing is flawed, just because of how it presupposes blame on both sides, and that's just kind of baked into the word. So there's nothing wrong with the concept of reconciliation, but it's not the right word for our context. Whereas Mistawasis First is the perfect word for what needs to happen. Yeah. So thank you for that, David. So it's 17:01 in Toronto, and it's been a lovely, lovely time. I want to thank Contingencies of Care for asking me to be here with you today. I'm always so honored to have an opportunity to share my work, and I want to thank you all for your kind attentions and your very thoughtful questions, and I appreciate you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Archer. Thank you all for attending. This has been another one of these amazing presentations. Always wonderful to hear you speak, Archer, and to present your work with such a depth of history and knowledge. Deeply appreciated. For those of you who are watching this live, we have another presentation tomorrow with Krista Mariah at 2 p.m. EST. That's Friday, June 11th. And for those of you watching this on recording, you can catch this and other presentations here on this YouTube channel. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.